Hey, welcome back to Considering Christianity. My name is Brad Sarian. I'm a pastor of Restored Church in Los Angeles, and I've been putting together these videos to just better help those who may be skeptical or seeking. What is Christianity? Who is this Jesus guy? What's this whole Christian worldview about? And for the Christians who want to better understand how Christianity really impacts every area of life. And so I've put together several videos, big topics: science, history, philosophy. Today's going to be a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about LGBTQ plus community and Christianity and what is the deal. This video is going to be different. We've kind of spent quite a bit of time with kind of intellectual exercises, and in some ways I'm trying to convince you and compel you that Christianity is the most comprehensive worldview. In this video, it is not my desire to try to convince you into something. It's really to clarify what Christianity teaches and what Christianity believes historically, traditionally, over the past couple thousand years. So I expect there to be people who do not like what I say. I expect people to be confused by what I say. And all I'm asking is for you just to do your best to listen up and to hear what Christians really believe and teach about what God has to say about those who are gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender, and just what the Bible actually has to say about this very, very difficult but very real just thing that goes on in many, many lives. So my desire today is to break down some misconceptions and to share some of my story and share from the scriptures about this topic. And so the first thing that we just have to be clear on, though, is that the church has historically done a horrific job loving and understanding LGBTQ plus people, and that this grieves God's heart. The church has done a horrible job in the past in loving and understanding where people are coming from, and instead of loving and understanding have often been met with judgment. And so it is important to start this with that and to speak to you whether you are gay or lesbian, wherever you're at today. Like I just want you to first hear, as a Christian, as a pastor, as a leader in Jesus' church, I am sorry for the way that you have been treated. I'm sorry for the way that you've not been listened to. I'm sorry for the way you probably have not been loved or accepted in the church or by Christians. That maybe for some of you, Christians have been the most hurtful people. That when you maybe came out to a mother or a father or a trusted leader in the church about your gender identity or your orientation, you were met with judgment and condemnation instead of love and grace. And I want to say sorry. That it grieves God's heart deeply that the church has failed miserably at its one chief task of loving God and loving people. The church has not done a good job by any means of loving men and women who are gay and lesbian. And so I apologize because it's been my privilege to actually be, over the past decade or so, I've been a trusted ear by dozens of people who have shared with me their own experiences, both inside the church and outside the church, who have confessed to me and shared with me some of their secrets around this topic and around their lives. And I hate even saying topic. Preston Sprinkle, in his book, People to be Loved, even says this is not a topic, but these are about people. And so I may say that word at times, but it's essential to know that we're talking about people. And quite a few people have trusted me with this before they've even told anyone else. And God's put me in a perspective, in a spot, so that this is not just some intellectual exercise for me. This is a very intimate and very real thing that I have wrestled with other people with, try to wrestle with the scriptures, wrestle with Jesus. What do you say? What do you think about all of this? And so I think that generally where I land is probably going to offend some conservative Christians, and it's going to offend those who may be a part of a lesbian LGBTQ plus community. And so what I want to do as best I can is explain what I'm convinced the scriptures teach about this and hopefully clarify some misconceptions. But the reality is that false biblical teaching concerning LGBTQ plus individuals has created an unnecessarily immense amount of pain and conflict. That there are so many misconceptions around this that has hurt so many people, and so much of that pain is so unnecessary. Yes, there's going to be disagreement, and there's going to be some pain in the midst of wrestling with God and who He is, no matter who you are. But so much of the pain and conflict is unnecessary. And so what I want to do is I want to dive into 4 of what I believe are the most common misconceptions regarding LGBTQ plus community and Christianity, okay? And so from a Christian perspective, I want to tackle these things one by one, and I'm going to go quickly. If you have more questions, would love to chat through those things, but I'm going to try to get through these 4 misconceptions as quickly as possible, and I will leave out a lot, obviously. So the first main misconception is that same-sex attraction is sinful. This is one of the biggest misconceptions, both from Christians and non-Christians, is that same-sex attraction is sinful. The Bible never says homosexuality is a sin. It doesn't. Every single time the Bible speaks about homosexuality is in regard to an action. It's regard to a lust or an action, a sexual action. It's not talking about a mere attraction to the same sex. A helpful verse in the Bible. I haven't opened my Bible in this Considering Christianity because we've been talking more philosophically. But for this video, I want you to see what Christians who believe the Bible believe about this, or ought to. So James chapter 1, it says this about this, the temptations. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So you see this story of how sin gets there and death gets there. But it starts with temptation. Then it moves to desire. And when desire gives birth, it gives birth to sin. And sin ultimately gives birth to death. And so when we talk about, when people say being gay is sinful, we have to define our terms. We cannot be sloppy with our language in such a delicate and important conversation. And so the Bible never says that homosexuality is sinful. It talks about the act of it, and we'll look at a couple of those verses. But here, that there's a temptation, then there's a desire, then there is sin, then there is death. And it's important to get this because Jesus in Hebrews chapter 4 has said that he was tempted in every single way as we are, yet was without sin. So it is possible and very likely to be tempted and not sin. You can be tempted towards something. You could be attracted. You could have desires towards something and not sin. When you give into that sin, and where that line is, it may be a little more gray than we might want to admit. But when you give into that sin, into that desire, then it becomes sin. But you can absolutely have an attraction and a desire that does not lead you into sin. It's just a simple acknowledgement of this is what I'm attracted to. Any married man or any married woman can acknowledge that they are attracted to other men and women. That attraction in and of itself to go, wow, I find them beautiful, I find them attractive, is not sinful in and of itself until that thought becomes a lustful thought of not only do I see them as attractive, I need them. And then the action leads with sin. And so it's very important for us to get that just because you say, I'm gay, because I'm attracted to the same sex, that isn't sinful in and of itself. Like when you're sleeping at night, you're not in sin just because you're attracted to the same sex. And so it's important because I talk to so many people who think I can't ever become a Christian because I'm gay. And Christians believe that you can't be Christian and gay. I don't think I can change this. I don't think you may be able to change it. Some do, some don't. But it's not about that. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But it's important to grasp that your attraction in and of itself is not sin. It can become sin once a desire gives birth to sin as you long for this, you desire this deeply more than God himself, and then act on it. Then it is sin. But the attraction in and of itself is not sin. The second misconception is that gay sin is the greatest sin. Gay sin is the greatest sin. It's one of the biggest misconceptions, both in the church and outside the church. And we have these misconceptions maybe primarily because of the media, where you have groups like the Westboro Baptist, I don't know what to call them. They go to funerals and they picket places that God hates fags. That's their main sign. God hates fags. And so we see that on the news. We go, oh man, that must be the one thing God hates. And does God hate the act of homosexuality? Yes, he hates all sin. Proverbs 6 lists a bunch of sins that are an abomination to God. Lying, pride, the divisive person. So as Westboro Baptist chants, God hates fags, man, they could put on that sign. God hates liars, and God hates prideful people, and God hates divisive people. God hates us, right? That's what they could put on those signs. God hates all sin. Sin is a rebellion against him. It's a mockery of him. It's a turning away from him and turning to something else to find joy and satisfaction that can't ultimately give you that. So it's important for us to know that gay sin is not the greatest sin. The Apostle Paul is helpful in this. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, he lists, there's several lists in the New Testament about homosexual sex or in sin. There's one in Leviticus in the Old Testament. A lot of people go, well, it's in the Old Testament. It is also in the New Testament. So it's not just something in the Old Testament. And yes, there was context 2,000 years ago of homosexual relationships that weren't just based on different ages and different social classes. And so I could get into that stuff later. But 1 Timothy chapter 1, occasionally throughout the New Testament, there'll be lists of sins. I do it as a preacher. I'll be like, if you're struggling with this, or this, and I explain it. And Paul does the same thing in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 8. And he says this, "Now we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. Understanding this, that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, for those who strike their fathers and mothers, for murderers, the sexually immoral, men who practice homosexuality, enslavers," again, many people don't think that slavery was wrong biblically. It is. It's always been. "Enslavers, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine." So here the Apostle Paul just lists a bunch of sins. And in that are men who practice homosexuality. Again, it comes down to the act. It's not they just are attracted to. It's they act on their attraction. And that's in a list of liars and sinners and perjurers and all these other things, saying it's just one of the many. And it's in the list of Romans 1 and here and throughout 1 Timothy. And it's just it's one of the sins. And it is a sin in the act of it, but it's not the greatest sin. What's fascinating about the Apostle Paul himself is later on, just a few verses later in 1 Timothy chapter 1, in verse 15, he says this, "This saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I'm the foremost." The Apostle Paul, who wrote half the New Testament, he says, Jesus came. I just named some sinners. Jesus came in the world to save sinners, and guess what? I'm the worst. The Apostle Paul does not go, who's the worst? Gay people. He doesn't. He goes, I'm the worst. Paul knew his own heart. He knew that he was a persecutor of the church, but he says it even in the present tense. I am the worst of sinners. He knows his heart. And so it's important for us not to believe the misconception that gay sin is the greatest sin. It's one of any sins that is a rejection of God. It's a rebellion of God that leads us away from him. A third misconception is that being gay is a choice. Third misconception, that being gay is a choice. Many Christians teach this and say this, and it's so unfortunate because I actually would agree more with a Macklemore or Lady Gaga who say, no, I was born this way. I can't change this. Macklemore writes in his song about this is not something that people choose. It is something you can be born with. Scientifically, we've not discovered a gay gene, but I still absolutely believe biblically, theologically, that you can be born with a desire that does not necessarily align with God's plan. I was born with tons of desires that are not godly desires that I need to say no to in order to say yes to Jesus. And so it's important for us. And people who say you can't be born with it have clearly never talked to gay people. I have sat there and I have talked and I've cried with gay brothers and sisters who have said, I didn't choose this. From as early as I can remember, I want to not do this. I want to not desire this. A Christian goes, no, I know deep down you chose this. It's not a choice. It can be for some. It can be culturally influenced or influenced via family of origin, all those things, but it's not necessarily. I know many men and women who would not say that they chose this thing. And biblically speaking, we do not need to say, yes, 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 this was purely a choice. We all have desires that are not God's desires. And the whole point of being a Christian, Jesus says, is to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Everyone, if you want to follow Jesus, you have to say no to desires that you were born with, desires that feel like the real you. You have to say no to those things in order to follow Jesus into an abundant life. And even saying no to these desires, it sounds crazy for our secular culture that says, be the true you, discover who you really are, and just that you need to be transparent and real to who you are. Tim Keller, in one of his books, he brings up an excellent point of showing how culturally influenced we are. And then when people say, you need to become the true you, just see who you really are and live that out, he says it's not good advice, and it's really unhelpful. Because which true you? When you really dive into this heart of yours, you find that you have tons of different desires that often compete with one another. And he gives a brilliant example. He says, imagine if you were an Anglo-Saxon warrior in AD 800 in Britain, and you found this desire in your heart of anger and just the desire to crush people. And as a warrior, that is celebrated in that culture. Go out, destroy the enemy, kill as many as you can. That's great. But imagine that same Anglo-Saxon warrior had this desire for same-sex attraction and to sleep with other men. In that culture, they would go, no, don't do that. Suppress that, but live out your anger and your violence and live this. This is the true you. Suppress that. And Keller says, imagine now, 2018, a man walking down the streets of Manhattan, and he has these two raging desires in him. One is anger to hurt the people who bother him, and the other one is to sleep with men that he's attracted to. What's culture going to say? It's going to say the exact opposite of what it said in AD 800. It's going to say, hey, suppress that anger. Anger is bad. You need to go see a therapist for all that rage that you have inside, but you need to be the true you. Don't let anyone tell you what you should do sexually. You should just be the true you. So we are culturally influenced. That doesn't make it right or wrong or whatever it is, but we need to be honest about the fact that we can't just say, I need to look within and just be exactly who I am. We're a mess when we look inside. There's a lot of competing desires. And so what we want to do, if you're a Christian, is go, Jesus, you show me what desires I should live out of. You show me what you desire for my life that will actually lead to abundance. So the other thing with that is a lot of people go, well, you're denying people happiness. And I get that, man. I understand that as a married, heterosexual, straight male with two kids, that I enjoy things that my brothers and sisters who are gay, have chose celibacy following Jesus, they are going to struggle with much more than I'm going to. So I don't want to pretend that they're equal. I say no to these desires, you say no to that. They're different, and I absolutely believe they are. But we need to also be careful with the lie that many people sell, is like marriage and sex is really the ultimate goal, and that'll make you ultimately happy. David Brooks, in his book, The Second Mountain, says in America, 40% of marriages end in divorce. Another 20% or so are chronically unhappy. So statistically, about 60% of marriages end in unhappiness. So we need to be really careful. Be like, if I want to be happy, I've got to have this. It's like, well, in America, actually, statistically speaking, no. And obviously that shows that our marriage system is broken in America. The way we view marriage, not God's design for marriage, but the way Americans view marriage is clearly broken. But we need to be careful of saying, if you want to be happy, this is how you have to pursue it. True happiness comes from following Jesus, from saying no to the flesh, saying yes to him. The fourth main conception, I know we got to hurry here, is that gay Christians need to become straight Christians. Fourth main misconception is that gay Christians need to become straight Christians. This is a lie. This has hurt so many people. There is nothing in the Bible that says once you become a Christian, then you've got to start being attracted to the opposite sex. Jesus says, be holy as I'm holy. He doesn't say be heterosexual as I'm heterosexual. The goal of following Jesus is to become more like him, not in your sexual orientation, but in your holiness, in your life, in your love, in your sacrifice, in your truth. And so it's important for us to not think like once you get saved, or before you get saved, you need to change your orientation and your desires and attraction. No. Some Christians I know have that desire for the same sex has diminished as they follow Jesus, and others it hasn't. So there's no clear formula of this is what it's going to look like. I have many friends who have become Christians. They were gay, attracted to the same sex, and then became Christians and have said, okay, I'm not going to live in those sexual relationships. But I'm still attracted. And that's okay. You can't change that attraction. You can pray, yes, but if God doesn't take that away, if it doesn't change, that's fine. You can faithfully follow Jesus even when you're attracted to the same sex. And so, unfortunately, in the church, people have just thought that this is the worst sin, and so you got to just change yourself. But I really believe deeply. I've got 2 kids. And as I've wrestled with this a lot, and I've talked with parents who have kids that come out as gay, and they're terrified. They don't know what this means. And I'm always confused by that, because I'm like, hey, if this could be an opportunity for your son or your daughter to more faithfully follow Jesus, you should be excited about that. Yes, mourn the fact that this is going to be difficult. This is going to be really hard. But this doesn't mean that they can't follow Jesus. In fact, some of the most passionate Jesus followers I know are celibate gay men and women who love Jesus deeply. And if I had the choice of a son or a daughter who didn't follow Jesus or was just kind of apathetic toward him, but was heterosexual and had a big family, or a gay son or gay daughter who loved Jesus deeply, followed him sacrificially, I will take that every single time. My identity can't be wrapped up in I need to be a grandfather of a big family. My identity is I want my kids to flourish with Jesus. And I don't care how that happens. I want them to flourish with Jesus in whatever thing they're in. And so those are 4 of the main misconceptions. And so let me end with this. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge to both Christians and non-Christians, so the Christians and the secular crew. It's this. We must abandon judgmentalism for the sake of love and truth. We must abandon judgmentalism for the sake of love and for truth. And so for Christians, you are commanded to not judge non-Christians. This is so new for many Christians, and for non-Christians they'll be shocked by it because it's so contrary to the way they've been treated. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul, he's writing to the church at Corinth. He says, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. Not at all meaning the sexually immoral of this world, or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters, since then you need to get out of the world. For what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. So if you're a Christian, can I please just encourage you and challenge you? Please stop judging non-Christians. It's not your job, it's God's job. He'll do it. And he does a way better job than you and I can do it. So if you disagree with a coworker, you disagree with a family member, that's fine. You don't judge them. You don't condemn them. You let God deal with them. Yes, you can tell them what you believe Jesus says, but you don't need to judge them and condemn them in that. You're commanded not to. And for the non-Christians listening, would you please understand that disagreement is not equivalent to hatred. Disagreement is not equivalent to hatred. People ask me all the time as a pastor, as a Christian, what do you think of gay people? I'm like, I love gay people. I hate that that's like, what do you think of like this thing called gay? I love gay people. I'm commanded by my King to love all people, regardless of gender, regardless of orientation, regardless of race, regardless of class. Love them. And so do I disagree with your worldview, your understanding? Maybe so. But it doesn't mean I hate you. I love you. We need to be able to have conversations where we can sit down and go, I disagree with you, but I still love you. And I hope you can disagree with me and still love me. Because there's a good chance, if you do disagree with me, it doesn't mean you hate me necessarily. We can just go, man, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's true. And then we can have good conversation. And so the fact is, Jesus came and he denied himself so that he could have you. He loves you no matter where you're at, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, wherever, transgender, wherever you're at. God loves you so much where you're at now, not a future version of you, but you right now, that he said no to his own desire at the Garden of Gethsemane when he said, Father, is there another way? And he put that away so that he could have you. He loves you deeply. He wants you. And he says, follow me into abundant life. So I love you. I hope that if you have more questions, please feel free to email me, brad@restoredla.com. That'll probably be better than the comment section below. But yeah, would love to talk through this with you wherever you're at, and if you have questions to help as best I can. So I look forward to next week as we continue this teaching series.